Okay. Hello. You'll be pleased to know that my talk is less than 15 minutes, so hopefully we'll make up the time. Okay, so my name is Erika Moisl. I work for Alzheimer Society in the UK. And today I'll be talking about dementia, or rather the views of people with dementia and carers about how they feel about talking about dementia. Okay, so I work at Alzheimer Society, like I said, and since I've been there, I've come across quite a few examples that endorse the benefits of talking about dementia. So, for example, a lot of our public awareness, campaigning, and policy work suggests that it's good to talk about dementia. And at the same time, a lot of the support services that we provide for people with dementia and for carers seem to promote the idea of talking about dementia. That's a positive thing. The assumption is that it's beneficial for people affected by dementia to talk about dementia. But at the same time, I've also come across a few examples that question this assumption. So in the evaluation team, one of the things we do is support members of staff to evaluate the services that they provide to people with dementia and carers by collecting feedback about their experiences of the service. So recently we developed some questions and actually included the word dementia in some of the questions. And the feedback that we got from some of our staff was that they were concerned about using this term with people affected by dementia because it could cause distress. But this seemed to be to run contrary to some previous findings of an evaluation that we did last year, which suggested that talking about dementia could actually be beneficial for people with dementia and carers in a number of different ways. So, we wanted to set out to find out from people who use our services how they feel about talking about dementia and what the main influences are over this. And the aim of it really was to produce a set of recommendations to inform how we talk about dementia with our service users, so people with dementia and carers, when we're evaluating our services. So, from June to August this year, we conducted semi-structured interviews with 20 people with dementia and 16 carers around different areas of England. All of them were currently using Alzheimer Society services, and they were recruited through the services. So it's really important to say at this stage that the people who we recruited were given information that clearly stated that the subject of the interviews would be talking about dementia. So it was necessarily the case that the people who volunteered to take part, because it was a recruitment on a self-selection basis, were the people who were prepared to talk about dementia. So, but also it was people who were prepared to talk about dementia with me and colleagues of mine who they'd never met before. The interviews were conducted mostly in the homes of the people who we interviewed, but some of them were interviewed at the services that they attend. But it's important to note that people with dementia and carers were separated during the interviews, and the idea was that this would give everybody an opportunity to talk openly about their feelings and hopefully minimize any kind of influence that the presence of the carer or the person with dementia might have over that. Okay, so during the interviews, the idea of talking about dementia wasn't defined, and that was so that people could tell us how they feel about talking about dementia and what it means to them, so they could interpret it in their own way. And what we found after analysing the interviews was that there was three main themes that kind of described how people with dementia and carers that we interviewed feel about talking about dementia and what it means to them. So we were able to compile a number of different case studies, but today I'm just going to present one because I feel that it helps to represent the three different themes that I'm going to talk about, but also the way that they interconnect with each other. So the first thing I'm going to do is present a case study of a couple who I'll refer to as Mr. and Mrs. J. And then I'm going to talk through the three themes that I described, and then finally I'll present the recommendations that are going to inform the way that we work as a result of this. Okay, so please bear with me. I'm going to read out the case study from the slides, but it is just 2 slides. I just hope that this will help to everybody to understand it. So, Mr. J feels unable to disclose his diagnosis of dementia beyond close family members. He described 3 main barriers which influence this. So the first one is the stigma that he feels is associated with the term dementia, particularly due to the linguistic association between dementia and crazy in his first language, which is not English. The second barrier that he described was the perceived negative reaction from other people, in particular the fear of the loss of status within, and also exclusion from the professional community that he's part of. And this is compounded by the fact that those people are also his friends, so his social circle. And the last one is that his friends don't live nearby. So he feels that a disclosure like this is something that you really have to do face to face. It's not something you can do over the phone or by email. So his wife and carer, Mrs. J, is struggling to cope. She holds some of the same reservations about disclosing the diagnosis of dementia more openly, in that friends and acquaintances would treat Mr. J differently. But she feels that talking about dementia-related topics, in particular things like tips and ways to cope, might be beneficial for her. So Mrs. J, she told us that she does have some close friends that she can talk about the situation with, but often Mr. J is there and wants to be involved in the conversation, so she feels like that inhibits her from being able to do so. And this is all kind of built up so that when Mr. J and Mrs. J discuss dementia together, the exchange can be quite tense sometimes, and she described that he felt like she was always kind of having a go at him. Mrs. J has had limited access to a support group for carers, but found that other carers were carers of people in much later stages of dementia, so she didn't feel that her own experience was comparable with the other carers there. And at the same time, there had been a support service, so a support group for people with dementia in earlier stages and carers, but that had actually been stopped in a local area, so they didn't have access to that anymore. Okay, so as I said, the case study hopefully helps to illustrate the 3 main themes that came out of all of the interviews that we did. And these can be described as, firstly, disclosure, so sharing the diagnosis of dementia with people around them. The second one is discussion, so that's people with dementia and carers talking about dementia-related topics, often with people who are already aware of the diagnosis. And then thirdly, terminology, so the words that they used to talk about dementia. Okay, so I'm just going to go through these themes just a little bit more in detail. So the first one is disclosure. These are some of the things that people told us about how they feel about sharing a diagnosis of dementia with people around them. Some of the things that people with dementia and carers told us was that it can be beneficial to disclose the diagnosis of dementia if the family members or the friends or the acquaintances who they disclose to are supportive and accepting of that. It can also help people with dementia to feel more confident, to tell people if they're having problems, for example, being able to remember who somebody is, or they may have forgotten something. And it can also help to show other people that they're still the same person by making that disclosure. But there were 2 main factors which were found to influence how people with dementia and carers feel about sharing their diagnosis. And one is the perceived reaction of the people around them. So as I said, people felt that if people around them would be accepting and supportive, then that was a beneficial thing. But there was a lot of apprehension that people might treat the person differently, and that constitute quite a significant barrier. And then the other influence was having a close support network of either family or friends who live nearby. 3 minutes. Okay. Yeah, okay. And then so the second theme was discussions. That's about how people with dementia and carers talk about dementia-related issues with people who might already be aware of their discussion. So that's about their diagnosis, and this is some of the things that people told us about it. So people felt that it could be beneficial to discuss dementia-related topics if that meant that they could maybe learn from other people who had similar experiences, and also there were occasions where they could help to kind of promote and raise awareness about the reality of living with dementia. But again, there were 2 main influences over how that influenced people about whether they felt comfortable or not to talk about dementia-related issues, and one was the presence of the person with dementia or the carer. So in some occasions, then people felt that if the person with dementia or the carer was present, then this could inhibit them from talking about issues that might be quite personal or difficult. And the second one was the approach. So people described different approaches of actually talking about dementia-related topics, but one that came up quite often was using humour. And some people felt that it was beneficial to use humour to be able to come to terms with and discuss quite difficult issues. And then thirdly, we talked about terminology. So again, we started off talking about dementia, the word dementia, and also Alzheimer's came out. Some people felt that it was beneficial to use the words dementia and Alzheimer's, and that it could help to kind of explain to other people the reality of the situation. And also, also if people felt that there was not really an adequate kind of alternative word, one of the things was memory problems or memory issues that came up quite often as like an alternative term. But then a lot of people told us as well that they didn't really feel that was adequate for really describing the reality of what was happening. So again, in terms of using the terms dementia or Alzheimer's, there were two main things that influenced how comfortable people felt, and the first one was stigma. So in the case of Mr. and Mrs. J, it was very much related to the linguistic stigma, so the association with crazy. But there was also kind of historical stigma, so people remembered having been kind of sectioned, or people described being put in the loony bin, and a lot of kind of very negative associations. And then the second influence was the situation. So people have already talked about the kind of medical versus social model. But yeah, that was the same here. So sometimes people felt more comfortable to use the words dementia and Alzheimer's if they perceived that the person who they were talking to was a medical professional, and that there wasn't really so much, it was more of a kind of a neutral situation. Whereas if they were talking about friends and family members, then people might feel that they were trying to elicit sympathy, when indeed that wasn't really the case. Okay, so it's a really quick snapshot. I know that our time's running out, but I just want to quickly run through the recommendations that are coming out of this piece of work. So the wider recommendations for Alzheimer's Society is that we continue raising awareness about dementia to address the persisting stigma attached to the terms dementia and Alzheimer's, but it's really important that we're involving people affected by dementia in that awareness raising, so that it's the voice of the people with dementia and carers who comes out and not our voice. And then fighting for provision of services catering for people at all different stages of dementia, but in this case, particularly early stages. And then in terms of service evaluation, so how we talk about dementia with our service users when evaluating services, the first one that we feel really strongly about is don't be afraid of using the term dementia and Alzheimer's, because some people feel that it's beneficial to do so, they feel comfortable to do so, and that even that's contributing to raising awareness and addressing the stigma, but that we need to make sure that it's the person who determines whether we use that term or not. It's not us deciding that. And then the second one is giving people with dementia and carers the opportunity to talk about dementia in the way that they want. So a lot of people will come to our support services because they want to talk about dementia, so we need to make sure that we are giving people that opportunity. At the same time, a lot of people won't want to talk about it. Yeah, okay. They won't want to talk about it, but they might, we need to also ensure that we're saying to people, if you change your mind and you do want to talk about it at any time, we're there, we're going to support you with it, and we just need to make sure that that's the way that they want. Thank you very much.